Welcome to another live stream on YouTube and LinkedIn here, bringing you another exciting episode of the Top Innovator series. This is where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and the brilliant minds behind them. My name is Joseph Martens, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest. With us today is Carrie Goetz. Carrie is the CTO of StrategITcom, a consulting firm focusing on strategy and technology planning. Before this, she held several other roles as tech executive, and she is also an author and a keynote speaker. Her latest book is called Polly Packett's Precious Payload, All Smiles to the Data Center. Carrie, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, with the fantastic career that you've had, you must have made a ton of experience watching leaders, being a leader, and learning something from it. I'd be curious to start off with your reflection on that journey. When you think of your own journey, what do you think are some of the factors that made you successful? What do you think are the ingredients to the success that you had?
I would say probably being a lifelong apprentice. This is one of those industries where we don't have a lot of curriculum. And so a lot of our knowledge is really sort of organically passed from one person to another to another. And I think that as long as technology keeps up with this pace, that is always going to be that way. So from a leadership perspective, I think that you have to really sort of lead by example and be willing to dive in with both feet and do what you ask your team to do. There's always times when, maybe you hand out an assignment that they absolutely hate or can't stand or, don't understand the meaning of or why they're even doing that. And I think part of being a leader is being able to communicate that and say, hey, this is the business need, because then not only are you working sort of in that apprenticeship model, but you're also helping with that mentorship model. So you're helping them figure out from a company standpoint why it matters. It's one thing to learn it in a book. It's another thing to learn it when it's all practical, hands-on experience on the job. And I think that people are a lot more receptive and feel way more included in projects if you pick them up from the first bit and let them know what the outcome's supposed to be and what the expectations are. And that, you hired them for their expertise. Let them use it.
Right. I like this apprenticeship idea. That's a little bit counterintuitive because so many people are striving for mastery, right? Which is, of course, not apprenticeship. So I wonder, how do you keep that mindset of apprenticeship, that not being perfect at everything or not having arrived? How do you keep that fresh and how do you convey that to others?
I don't know that apprenticeship is not necessarily not doing things right the first time. It's a matter of passing knowledge, right?
Okay.
So for me, when I say apprenticeship, that really is taking everything that you've learned and passing it on, right? My first book, that's 100% what that is. That is a culmination of 40 plus years of expertise of people that have been very kind to answer a lot of questions for me. And I think that's important because for a lot of people, they get in a career and they see that career only, and they forget to look about all the periphery that's around them. And that's where your next opportunity might be. That's where your next passion might be. And so I think when I talk about apprenticeship, it's really more of that lifelong learning model, right? Technology comes out way faster than we're going to have curriculum to support. And so we have to have that mentality that we want tech to work for us. We're not going to work for tech. I think that's a huge differentiation, right? Yeah. And then out of that, how can I apply these skills? What can I pull out of that and make it do something different? What can I do to make this more encompassing of the other ideals within the organization? And you find that all the time. If you're, say for instance, you're working with a company helping them figure out their IT stack. You can very easily say, well, let's use this one, and this one, because I've used it in the past. It's great. But if you don't know what the company's real goals are, you might have picked this one, and this one, which are the three worst options for that company. We all do things differently, right? So when I talk about that apprenticeship thing, it's not just, if you're writing code, figure out how a network works so that you're not being a jerk to the network with your code. Figure out how your compute mechanisms work. If you're going to abstract from the hardware layer, figure out what that looks like and how you can make that work. And if you don't know, you've got to be able to ask. And I will say that I think this is one of the most giving industries for people helping other people with knowledge and passing on that knowledge. I think it's really unsurpassed, and I think it's really grown a lot out of necessity. And to be fair, I think we're really sort of getting to the point where outside of some jobs that literally require a degree, there's so many of our jobs that don't.
Right.
And if you think about that from a cost perspective, take it from a young kid, right? So we take a 20-year-old, bring them into our organization, put them through employee training, start teaching them some of the skills. You're going to get a very different outcome than if you get that from somebody in college that's been taught, here's a problem, this is the way you solve it. If you say, here's the tools, how would you go about it? People go about things differently, right? Some people put their pants on both feet. Some people do right leg, then left leg. Some people do left leg, then right leg, right? We have to have that input because that's meaningful diversity. It's not diversity based on some superficial thing. It's a diversity of experience, a diversity of thought. That's where you get really meaningful diversity. If you take a really gifted engineer that's been through college and figured that out, and you put it with a tradesman that's just very good at just sorting things out and working things out, the outcome of that product is going to be significantly better than if you give it to an engineer and then you give it to a tradesman, because they miss that interaction and they miss that dialogue. And I think that in so many ways, and a lot of it is my generation's fault, to be fair, because we told our kids that you're not going to be anything without a college education. Yeah. And so there's a lot of kids that value their degree more than they value themselves. And I think that's really, really horrible, because we're burying some of that ingenuity. We're burying some of that insight and forethought. Yeah. So that's when I say apprenticeship, that's what I mean. Like, give people the basics and then let them run with it.
I got it.
Let them figure out where it goes. That's where the real innovation happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You said something interesting there, many interesting things, but one thing that just stuck with me now is that we're in a very giving industry. And I think that's also true in the advice that we give each other, or the knowledge that we share with each other. What's some of the advice that you've received that really stuck with you? So, or what has been given to you in terms of wisdom, in terms of guidance that you really valued?
Probably one of the biggest age-old ones is the only stupid question is one that doesn't get asked.
Okay.
You'll find that in meetings. If you ask a question, somebody else probably had that same question. They were just afraid to ask it. So I think that definitely is a good one. I would say that one of the other ones is really to have a mind more for what it means for a company for something to happen as opposed to individually, because we get I think it's even worse today, right? We get lost in our social media and everything becomes curated to us. Well, we work for companies. It's not curated to us. It's not, we're part of that company and we're there for our expertise. But what can the company do to help our fellow man? And I think when you start looking outwards, then it changes your thought, right? It's not about me, because you'll end up helped along the way. You definitely get back tenfold. I'm a firm believer. But I think that having that spirit of looking outward as opposed to inward, I think is also something that's very good. Considering the company's take, considering the consumer's take.
Say a bit more about that company focus. That I didn't quite get that. Say a bit more about the differentiation you made there between.
Right, here's a good example. Years ago, I worked for a company and we were doing an audit on number of subscribers. I knew the number of subscribers that was reported was incorrect. So the whole deal became, okay, well, whose number is right now? And we have to prove that. So we got a whole team of people involved. I had a team that was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. Just look at it at the end of the month, call it good. That's how we've always done it. Why have we always done it that way? Well, because we have. Well, that's a lousy answer, right? If you could get through 5 whys and you're still good, as they say, then that's probably, but it wasn't. So I said, well, look, no, there's a difference here, because we're about to be acquired. These are numbers that are legally binding. We're expecting our executives to sign off on these numbers, so we owe it to them as a customer of ours to make sure that we have the most accurate and best numbers that we can find to make sure that accuracy exists throughout the whole process. Well, that's a very different equation than, hey, how many subscribers do we have and audited for the last month, right? Now you know a reason. Now you know what's at the top of that ladder. Now you know why you're looking in that direction. And it sets kind of a intention, I guess, for lack of a better term, for what we're really going for here, for what that outcome is. And I think in a lot of cases, especially as we get busier and busier as a society, it's here, do this, not why. And then when you don't give the why, you rob the person of that chance to grow. Now, as they do reports after that fact, and they think about that, they think about, well, I did this triage, and this is what we learned, that, customer service can go back and backdate and add subscribers with a backdate. We want to allow that practice because that's where our inaccuracies were. But once you bring all the people in on the team and let them all know what the exact outcome and what the expectations are, then they have better information to do a better job, and it's a whole lot less frustrating because they know why they're doing the job.
I get it. It's the alignment to some extent, right? The alignment between. Got it. Okay, cool. Now we've talked about the past, right? Past leadership experience, lessons you've picked up. I'd like to take a look at today. And you talked about apprenticeship, about the learning, right? So what is something that you're trying to learn at the moment? What is something where you think, looking at your leadership, this is something where I can grow, where I want to grow, where I want to put some effort on, where I want to develop? What's an area that comes to...
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of work on national apprenticeships and trying to get more people into the industry through various methods that don't necessarily include college. I do think that we have a lot of brilliant minds out there, and I think that we put way more value in a college degree than we do in the person that holds it, and that's completely back to the way that it should be. So that's a big thing. Also doing things like running public speaking workshops and helping other people come along. I hear comments, well, I haven't heard you speak. How come, I would love to hear you speak. Well, if you hear somebody that I've worked with, technically you're kind of hearing me speak, right? If you do the right thing, you pass it along, and you kind of hear that, and people get comfortable in what they're doing. I do things like newbie walks at data center conferences, where people are new to the industry. Will go walk around, tell me what you do, and I'll tell you how all this stuff fits with your job. So you start learning the periphery. For me personally, I'm working on some cool AI projects, trying to figure out how to help neurodiverse people through AI do some cool different things. So,
wow, okay,
that's something I'm pretty excited about.
That's an exciting cause. Yeah. Now let's take
everybody's got something to contribute. We just have to figure out what highway they need to be on to contribute, right?
Yep. I'd like to take a look into the future now, into a murky crystal ball, and talk to you about the future of your leadership. If we were to have this conversation in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, something like that, and I ask you, what have you learned in that time? Where was your growth? Where was your development? What do you think you're likely to see? And I know we're speculating now, right? But what's the next level of leadership for you? Not in positions, not in roles or so, but in terms of development. What do you think is next for you?
I don't know. I am one of those lifelong learners. So for me, it'll be a different thing this month than it will be next month, than it will be the following month, because stagnation is something I'm not comfortable with. I would love to be button sand, beverage in hand, within the next 3 to 5 years. So kind of sorting out how that works, and then figuring out how to contribute and give back. I'll never fully retire, but certainly figuring out what the next chapter is going to look like from a mentorship perspective, and how to help other people along and do that in a meaningful way.
How to pass something on, right? How to make sure others are benefiting from that. Yeah. I would imagine, and tell me if this is wrong, but I would imagine that your speaking and you being an author also goes in a similar direction, right? You're passing something, you're looking for multipliers, your audience is a multiplier, and they can carry that message forward.
Well, to me, it's really about giving back. I've taken the last 2 years and really focused on doing exactly that, giving back. And a lot of that was through the book. When I wrote the first book, the attrition rate for women in tech was 67%. Not that left a job, that left the entire industry. Despite having very applicable skills that would apply to other jobs within the industry. And so for me, being able to grow that umbrella and help people have that full ecosystem understanding of how things work, I think it makes you better in your job no matter who you work for. But it also sets you up personally for a better future, because now if you end up not happy in your job, some other jobs where you can jump to and you can go to and find things that work. But I also think, just from an inclusivity standpoint, that it's very important for people to have enough knowledge to participate in conversations. And that was really a big driver for writing the book. I've always been on the propeller head side. And so you go on a sales call, maybe with a salesperson, and as soon as the conversation gets a little technical, they zone out. And then they miss that big giant part of the conversation. And because they've zoned out, because they didn't understand, you've done them a huge disservice, right? So we would go to lunch afterwards, explain, this is how that, this is why that was important. This is, kind of the reason these topics are coming up, and explain it. And then the next time they're not zoned out. They're not sitting there like a deer in the headlight. And I think just that organic transfer of knowledge is one of those things, whether it's through a speaking engagement or through it's something, way less formal. All of those things I think are really critical, and those are things I'll never stop. I mentor a lot of people and work with a lot of young organizations and women that are very new to the industry that are kind of setting out on different paths, and tradespeople too. I think that we have to stop treating people in the trades as anything less than astonishingly brilliant, and and trying to work along some of those lines. So very much, I think my next 3 to 5 years is going to be figuring out the best blueprint to make a difference and make some of those things come to a bigger fruition. There are a lot of hurdles in that space. I've been working on them for a couple years. So yeah, hopefully figuring out a way to knock more of those out of the way without stumbling on them first. That's how non-coordinated I am would be the most.
That's funny. Now, let me ask you one question, maybe a bit about your audience and also what you bring to the audience. And that's the last question, and then we'll wrap it up. But when you think of other tech leaders, and you see a lot of them, right? What do you think is something they're missing? What is something that you see that makes sense to you, that is clear to you, and at the same time, there are a lot of people who don't see it? What is that?
So my claim to fame kind of in my industry, my old boss called me the queen of analogies.
Okay.
And when I taught college, I had Legos and Play-Dohs in the front of my classroom, Play-Doh, because not everybody can see in 3D, right? That is a gift. Not everybody has it. And I think so much of it is just framing things in a way that people can understand to bring them to the table and help them be part of whatever thing that you're working on is so huge. If that's rephrasing it a different way, if it's saying it in a way that, maybe you have to explain something 4 times before it sinks in because that was the trigger that made somebody, catch it. Those are the kind of things that I think from an audience perspective, people appreciate because I'll take that extra step. If somebody doesn't get it, I'll go that extra step. If somebody gets it, but there's a different way to look at it or maybe another point, I'm happy to do that. I'm also happy to call BS. There's been times when things come out in the industry and there's a bandwagon. You know how the bandwagon thing goes. Everybody jumps on this.
Everyone's there.
I'm going to do. Look at QR codes. They're a great example. How many years before we really started using QR codes, right? 10, 15 years ago, that was supposed to be the game changer for everything that we do. So I think it's really, some things are before their time. Some things are after their time. I wrote a great software package way before its time that flopped because it was before its time. And I think being able to communicate those things and figuring out ins and outs and have those honest conversations with people definitely helps because people realize everybody's fallible. This huge thing came about a few years ago with imposter syndrome. I'm sure you've heard about it. Everybody's heard about it.
Everyone has it probably, right?
Everybody has it. But it's healthy. But see, here's the thing. Instead of treating people like a victim for that, why don't we applaud them? And say, man, it's so good that you're nervous about this because now you can address what you're afraid of. Now you can think, man, this scares the bejesus out of me because, and then you can put a face to that, and then that's something actionable that you can fix. And I think that we have to, we have to get out of this victimhood. We very much as a society got into celebrity through victimhood. I think imposter syndrome was one. Women in tech is another one that comes up all the time. And it's not that there aren't victims, there are genuine, true victims. But I think we have to stop making these hurdles be walls, right? There's always a way around that. We have to be able to address them and have better skills to do that.
That's awesome. I mean, what a great statement. You're absolutely right. And that really moves us forward. That's a very positive way of looking at it. And I think that's a great message. Carrie, thank you so much. Yes. So we might as well embrace each other in that screwing up, right?
That's right.
and move on from that.
Sometimes when you screw up, it's the best laugh.
It is a painful moment, though. I mean, I'm just thinking of my own experiences there. Yeah. It is a painful moment.
It might be a better laugh later, but still.
Yeah. It might be a good story. Might make for good keynotes afterwards as well, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Carrie, there are many things that will stick with me from our conversation. I really like that focus on apprenticeship. Thank you so much for bringing that to the conversation. And thank you for being with us today. It's been a pleasure, Carrie.
Absolutely. Thank you.
For everyone else who was joining us, thank you for being here. Remember to like, subscribe, and join us again for the next episode of our Top Innovator series. And until then, make sure to keep your brain cells active.